All right, hey guys, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about what to do when a family member with OCD and anxiety asks for reassurance, right? And so this is part of our series on, how to help a loved one who has OCD and anxiety. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Cotty, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds and the creator of the AAA Response. And in this episode, I really want to dive into this idea of reassurance. And so for those of you that, support the show, we really also would appreciate real quick if you could do us a favor and like and subscribe, as well as leave a comment and review for the show, because that just really helps us with our ranking on the platforms as well. So, but diving back into the idea of reassurance. So reassurance, essentially, if I had to explain it to someone who didn't have OCD and anxiety, it's almost like a drug, right? I mean, that's the best way that I can explain it to somebody is like, I remember when I was really struggling with OCD and anxiety, one of the fears that I had was, well, what if I got possessed, right? And then that was that what if thought. And what I would do is one of my big compulsions or safety behaviors was to get reassurance. And so I had this list of people that I would get reassurance from, and I was really, really good at it, right? I mean, I was really, really good at it. I mean, I would call, hey, how you doing? Hey, just a quick question for you, right? And I would be in many ways manipulative, if I'm just being really transparent, to get reassurance, because ultimately I wanted to ask them a question to make sure I wasn't going to get possessed. And when they said something that really connected, right, or really put that fear to rest, I would just have this immediate like dopamine hit. I would feel better almost instantly, and the anxiety would calm down, and I'd go about my merry way. Not the problem is that 3 minutes later the next thought would pop up, and then I'd have to call the next person, right, or the next person, or sometimes I'd call the same person again. Hey, just real quick, like, just want to make sure about this, right? I don't know if I said this correctly, right, or whatever it was that I said. And, the thing is reassurance, it works. It works in the short term, or else people wouldn't do it, right? The problem is that when I state a fear to someone, like, let's just use me as an example, right? Like, so what if I get possessed? And I call, let's say, my mom, right? And I say, hey, can you like just confirm that I'm not going to get possessed? And she's like, oh yeah, no problem, right? Yep, you're totally good. And I feel better. Well, what's happened is that then the fear has been reinforced in my mind that really was a real threat, and that because I got reassurance that that's not going to happen, right, then the thought just is going to pop up again. Now, as parents and loved ones and spouses and children even, like as loved ones of people who struggle with OCD, we have to understand that when we're providing reassurance, it is going to help the person in the short term. And if our goal is to always make the person feel better in the short term, what's going to happen is over the long term, the anxiety is going to get worse. And ultimately, the compulsions, you're going to have to do them more and more and more because they're going to build tolerance. So what started as an initial like, oh yeah, you're good, right? Just reassure them real quick. Then what that turns into many times is many times a day, many times an hour, and even like just, to the point where you're just on the phone with them constantly, right? And you're falling behind at work because you're always answering reassurance questions, right? And this is what I mean when it starts to bleed into the family. And so with OCD and anxiety recovery, one of the major things is we have to be willing to prioritize the long-term recovery instead of the short-term comfort. Right? And as loved ones of people who struggle, right, if you are giving them reassurance, okay, especially repetitively, right, the problem is that it's going to reinforce their fear over the long term, and they're going to build tolerance to your reassurance, so they're going to need more of it on a day-to-day basis. And in many ways, it's not that different than a drug addiction. If I asked many of you if you were a loved one of someone who was struggling, and let's say that they were, let's just use, like a powerful drug like heroin, right? If they were asking you to inject them with heroin, you would probably say no, right? And they would tell you, hey, it's going to make me feel like, if they were addicted to heroin, right? This is just this example right here, right? Because the relief that the person gets from the reassurance is very real, right? It just happens, kind of internally, right? But the dopamine hit is real and all of that stuff. So the neurochemistry of it is not that different than an addiction, right? But if your loved one was sitting in front of you, was like, hey, can you please inject me with this, right? It's going to make me feel better today. Most of you would probably look at that and be like, look, I know it'll make you feel better today, but it's going to make you worse in the long run. And because I care about you, I don't want you to get worse in the long run, right? You could see the long run over their short-term comfort, right? And that same analogy applies with reassurance. And anytime you're doing any kind of compulsions for the person who's struggling. Now, and in the same way, when you don't give them what they want, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, there's going to be backlash. It just is an inevitability, right? And that's why explaining this, and so if you're someone who has a loved one who struggles with OCD and anxiety, it's not that I'm saying you need to be mean about it or anything like that. Like, please don't hear that, right? What I am saying though is you need to understand this from this context, because if you think you're helping them by doing all these compulsions and doing all these reassurance or checking or whatever it is you're doing for them, you need to realize that you're making them worse over the long run because you're accommodating the fear, right? And any accommodations eventually have to be eliminated for the person to really get better. And, so and again, our goal should always be the long-term recovery of the individual. Now, there's appropriate ways to do this, right? Having this educational process go through, like, the one we put people through with the Taking Back Control bootcamp that we run over Restored Minds, right? Like, there's a huge educational process that happens to help not only the person, but their families understand the entire context of this recovery process, right? And, because it's like, if you just come home and say, I'm not doing this anymore, well, that's going to create a lot of problems, because it's to the defense of the person who's struggling, you've been doing it for however long you've been doing it. So like, if you don't have good cause and reason why you're doing it and really explain that education of why you need to stop doing this, they're going to take it as an attack, as a personal, like, and so things get very personal, very heated, and this leads to bigger levels of conflict. And that's why, when we understand this OCD and anxiety loop, from the broadest context possible, and we understand the roles that everyone plays, that's what actually helps facilitate the best transition in something like this. So if you find yourself being one of the people that offer a lot of reinforcement or reassurance or checking or anything like that to someone who's struggling, yes, like it's so important that you see it in this context of like, hey, look, like, you're not helping them, and I know that might sound paradoxical, as you're like, no, I see it. They feel better immediately. You're right, they do. But in the grand scheme of their life and their recovery, you are hindering it. You're hindering that process. And yeah, this might not be a very popular topic, but it also, like, we need to be real and truthful, right? Like, we need to operate from a place of truth here, right? And so if you are a parent or loved one, I mean, one of the things is like, look, you can't provide reassurance, okay? It's like a drug to the person who's struggling with OCD and anxiety. And if you're giving it to them day after day after day, again, they're going to keep requiring it for the rest of their life. And really the goal should be to break them out of this loop so that we're able to break out of the habituation loop, or break out of the loop through habituation, really create that neuroplasticity, that rewiring in the brain that happens through this recovery process, and teach them tools that are going to serve them in the long run, like the AAA response. And so, and when you do that, like, then you're facilitating the long-term benefit for that person, the long-term recovery, and that as a loved one, of someone who's struggling, that should be your ultimate goal. Is you guys should both align as the person who's struggling and the person supporting them for their long-term benefit. And if they're asking you for reassurance, even when they know they shouldn't, then you need to say things like, hey, look, I'm here to support you and I want you to get better over the long run. And that's the reason that I'm not going to give you the reassurance, right? Is because we're going to sit there with the unknown together. And that's what's going to help you heal. And so, so hopefully that makes sense. And, if you're looking for additional resources and support, please head over to restoredminds.com. In fact, we have some links right down in the notes that will take you right where you need to go, whether it's downloads or free training, or even, with our bootcamp where we go through this psychoeducation process, as well as, specific training for family members on how to support loved ones. So thank you very much for taking the time to hang out with us today. I hope you guys have a great week. And again, we're going to continue this series in the next episode, where we're going to talk about additional questions for how family members can help loved ones with OCD and anxiety. So with that said, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, we just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to ultimately break out of that loop and start taking back control of your life. And again, like I said, it's totally free, and all you need to do to get access is just click the link down below, and you'll be taken to a page where you can start today. Thank you so much.